Pickaxe. Hello and welcome to the Chance Encounters podcast. Today we're going to be bringing something slightly different. It's an extra one, a bonus, would you say?
A very special episode of the Chance Encounters podcast.
Indeed. So we're not normally a new and reviews based show, but today we wanted to just get it out of our system and talk a little bit about the UK Games Expo. That's a bit of a mouthful. We went there over the last weekend, and it was pretty fab. It was the first time in force that it was available since 2019, yeah. They did have one that was slightly smaller last year.
They did a small one last year. I didn't go to it because I knew it was very small, and I still wasn't comfortable going to big conventions at that point.
Exactly. Pretty much everyone I talked to was like, maybe next year.
I feel like it's a cascading waterfall of people just saying, "Oh, I'm not feeling it," and then because somebody else,
Exactly,
everybody just didn't go.
So, if you're unaware of what the UK Games Expo is, or UKGE, God, still quite a mouthful to get around. What it is it's probably the foremost UK Games Expo.
It does what it says on the tin.
Exactly.
It's an exhibition of new and exciting games. Big retailers are there. Small little indie groups are there. Basically, anyone who's in board gaming and is square is there.
Exactly. So we went across, and it's a sort of 3-day event. So it was the Friday through Sunday. And this year, because it was done over the Jubilee weekend, it meant the Friday was also pretty busy.
Yeah, because I actually only went for just the Friday, which is what I normally do. I used to, years ago, always go there for the Friday and then spend the weekend doing tournaments, which are also hosted at the Expo. But this year I thought, I'm not doing any tournaments, but I'll still just go for the Friday, and then I'll go play with my friends afterwards. And God, it was like twice as busy as the Friday normally is. Friday's normally real dead and you can go in and see everything, but this was rammed. This was like a Saturday.
I thought it was really nice of the Queen to extend that weekend just for us to go and extend the expo. That was very kind of her. I'll never forget that.
Yeah, so it was a bit of a strange one. It was the first convention I've been to since the time that shall not be named. But it was really good. I actually found that slightly overwhelmed at the queue to begin with, but once everyone was in, it sort of dispersed down, and I actually didn't find it was too bad getting around. I think I said to Russ that as you go along, it was fine if you weren't trying to get anywhere. If you were meandering, it was okay. But as soon as you wanted to be somewhere, people were in your way.
That's definitely a classic UK Games Expo, though. And also, I just have a tendency to get really frustrated at slow walkers in general. So
you're out on a hike and you're just
bad combo.
Don't go to expos if you're a fast walker, or just kind of prep for that.
Follow the theme park strategy of head straight for the back first and then work your way back toward the front door.
Yeah.
Because 99% of people will walk in and just look at the first thing they see and slowly plod around.
Yeah.
Whereas if you bomb past everyone, go to the back, no one's there, look at everything and then work.
Ben, you can't be giving away all of these
top tips.
These are 5 trips that will make your convention time exponentially better.
Exponentially better. I like it.
That's right. They'll have all forgotten by next year.
Yeah, excellent. But no, it was a really good time. It was great to see everything from small publishers, people who are just bringing things to Kickstarter or even prototyping their games, through to the big ones. Asmodee is one of them that are just everywhere now, and it was cool to see exciting times. It's kind of, there's different types of conventions that you can go to. There are ones where are specifically trade or retail, and they're just trying to sell games off. This one is a really nice sweet spot where you can go, and then the convention halls, there's some organized play, so you can go and join in tournaments, as Ben said, or you can go and actually, most people have a demo table set up so you can kind of try the game before you buy, which is really nice to see. And then in addition to that, they also have open gaming areas where it's really trying to encourage people to play lots of board games, whether that's actually in a sort of the nearby hotel or even within one of their halls as well. And then they normally have a board game library, so you can take more board games. It's just board games upon board games.
Anything you could ever want to do with a board game, you can do it there.
Yeah.
I agree. It does have a mix of playing, buying, and unveiling games. I've only been to Spiel, and I've been to one of the American conventions, and this one does have I feel like the perfect balance, because if you want to go there to buy games, there's enough stuff there. There's enough publishers there that you can do that. If you just want to go and play games, there's plenty of space to play games. You're never not going to be able to find a place to play. And if you just want to go for a day, there's enough time to go and see things as well. So I think, as far as expos go, it's definitely the highlight of the UK. Just not sure, because I haven't been to all of the American ones, but I'm not sure. Yeah.
Well, I'm just going to say I've never been to any of the American ones, but I'm sure this one's the best.
Yeah. Exactly. No, it's fantastic. We got to, in fact, play on a pretty sweet table, a bit like this one. Whilst we were there was some areas in the open gaming that we tried out, and for me, I go because everyone's enthusiastic about board games, so it's just a just all the world combining together to just be like, hey, do you like board games? Of course I like board games. I just went around going like, I've got that t-shirt, I've got that t-shirt, I've got that t-shirt. I was literally like counting them. Exactly.
I pointed out one. I said, Rich, check out this guy's t-shirt. Says, I've got that. You got that from this place, didn't you? Like, oh, okay.
I actually need more nerdy t-shirts.
I looked for them. There weren't many people selling them there, actually.
No, I think 2019 I found a pretty cool one.
There was definitely less like little indie booths. Like before, I was hoping to find a new fancy wooden dice tower for Wingspan for my partner, but there was just hardly any of those little handmade like t-shirts and accessory kind of stalls that were there previously.
Yeah, so I think you're right that in previous years it has pretty much taken up the entirety of it. I don't know if you've been to the Birmingham NEC, but it's like a purpose-built convention center pretty much, and the first 3 halls are normally taken up by the UK Games Expo, and the first 2 halls are generally completely stuffed, like absolutely stuffed. So if you, I had a friend who came along with me, and they were just like, I'm not going to need more than a day, and I was just like, oh, now I understand why you need more than a day, just because it is ram packed with all the stuff. This year, I think it had about half of Hall 2, and that included some open gaming as well.
And the gaming was before. All the tournaments were in a separate hall from the rest of the expo. Yeah. So I guess they're still recovering. They probably lost a lot of money last year, I imagine.
Yeah. And I think people are probably still a little bit touchy, like all with everything going else everywhere else. But I think they did do a really good job bringing it back. And I think that I felt pretty good being there. And as I said, really enjoyed people. I'd love to go next year. I'd love the idea that we can see more of the indie people being confident that it's going to be well attended.
Let's talk games.
Yeah, exactly. What did you see?
So they weren't. I think we would mention this before the recording, but we just said that there's no like big game that we're really excited to see. Usually at the UK Games Expo, there's something, or at least a couple of games that you're really determined to see, and it's going to be the big hot game. But I don't feel like that happened this year.
I did walk in knowing that a game called Arc Nova is pretty hot at the moment.
Yeah, it's right in the charts, isn't it? It's always on Board Game Geek's hotness.
I personally am not a huge fan of the art, but Dickie, who has previously been on the podcast, was convinced that it's my kind of game. So I went in about 2 hours after they opened on the Friday, and I was like, please don't laugh at me. Do you have a copy of Arc Nova? And the guy was just like, no. We sold out of that like half an hour into it, and I was like, wow, you know what, that's totally fair. It's just we'd got in, we didn't have a game plan. Like, who goes into these things without a game plan? And then we were just like, I'm sure there's a game that we should be picking up. What game should it be? And then 2 hours in, we figured out what it was, and then they were gone.
Well, actually, I had, and to be fair, he didn't laugh at Rich, so good on him. I can't remember the story.
It was from the traveling
man, yeah. But thanks for that. I did have a game plan actually. At the last convention I attended, there was a lot of talk about this game called Scout, which is published by Oink Games, and I knew that, having looked online for it before the expo, that it was sold out in all my usual shops. So I said, if they have any, I'm going to go to Oink Games' stall and just pick up a copy. And I'm glad I did, because it did sell out, I think on Saturday. So it wasn't as much of a rush as I thought. But I did buy it, and we played it.
We did. So what kind of game was it then?
So
what's it called again?
It's called Scout.
Okay.
It's a circus-themed game, which is a very tacked-on theme for a numbered card game. You've got these cards, go from 1 to 10, but each card has 2 sides. So there's 2 different numbers on it. You get dealt out a hand of cards at the start, and essentially you're trying to score points by having the strongest set, which is called the active set. So a set is going to be a run of numbers, so like 3, 4, 5, for example, or a matching group of cards, so 2 3s or 3 3s, etc. If yours is the strongest set, the next player, so you play down a set, and then the next player has to beat it by playing a stronger set. I try to condense down how to describe how to determine a stronger set. I'm not going to bother. I'm going to try and bore you with that, but just know that you can beat it. Usually more cards is better, right?
Yeah.
Think a little bit like poker. So if you can't beat it, then you can take one end of that set and add it into your hand, and that's where the reversible cards come in, because you can use them to boost up a set of the cards in your hand, which is important because you're never allowed to change the order of the cards in your hand.
Oh.
So once you've got it, you choose to keep it upside down or the right way up, whatever way, and that's it. You're locked in on that orientation for the rest of the game. But the only way to change it is to add cards in it by taking them from the active set. And so you also get give them a point, which I realized we were playing wrong. I think in a previous podcast we talked about games that, Raoul, we were playing wrong. Yes, we played it wrong. So you give them a point for having scouting one of their acts. Makes sense. And then essentially, if it gets round to the player with the active set and nobody's beaten them, then the round ends and every card in your hand is worth negative points. Other than the person who actually triggered it by having the strong set, they don't lose any points from their cards.
Also a rule
Another
that we
rule,
didn't break.
yeah, this is great. This is great. And
Who taught me this game, Russ?
In my defense, I did learn it about sort of 2 minutes before we started playing. So I guess my crown should be given away.
No longer head of games. Head of coffee now.
I know, shame.
Demoted.
Yeah. But the game is still really fun, even though we played it wrong. I played it right subsequently.
Yeah.
It's got a lot more depth to it than you'd imagine for a game that is just numbered cards. Oink Games, known for doing these small boxes of really well produced, just tokens and cards usually, but they have, I feel like they have a hit on their hands with Scout, and it is actually nominated for the Spiel des Jahres, which is I like to call the equivalent of the board gaming Oscars.
Yeah.
So it's one of 3 games up for it. So I reckon it's got a shot. It's a good, solid game, and I think a lot more strategy than you might expect. And it's just, when you play a game and immediately you want to play it again because you think, oh, I get the strategy a bit better now.
Yeah.
That's always a good sign.
Yeah, especially in a short game like Scout. So yeah.
It's quite pretty, but it is like poker on steroids, pretty much.
Yeah. It's hard to teach, apparently.
Maybe hard to learn. It's probably more accurate.
I think once you get the cards in your hand, you can pretty much be like, okay, yeah, I can see that it's just numbers and you're just trying to make... So it does sort of make sense, although we played it wrong. Like the rules that I played seemed to make sense. Yeah. But no, it was a pretty neat one. I meant to pick up more games from Oink because I keep on being expected to bring board games, and Oink games are perfect because they're just like easy to fit into those bags.
Well, I did demo 2 other games I'll briefly mention. One of them was called Town 66. It's a bit like Quirkle. You've got different square tiles with a shaped like character on it and a color, and you start with a hand of 4 and you choose one, and it can never match a shape or a color in the row that it is. And it's called Town 66, presumably because it's a grid of 6 by 6, which you can never go out of. So think a bit like King Domino. And I didn't really get the strategy of it. I understand what I was doing, but it never felt like it challenged me. I wasn't seeing the best moves, and I think that
was it just kind of always obvious what you should be doing? No hard, difficult decisions?
No difficult decisions, but I feel like at points there wasn't really much decision making anyway. So I would not rule it out. I'm not saying it's a bad game. I just didn't get the excitement immediately after playing Scout, which I did.
In some respects, like the Oink games, if you see their catalogue, they have probably like 20 games at this point.
Oh, probably loads.
And they also have a significant variety of games.
Yeah.
Like we've talked about Fake Artists in New York before, and that's very different from Scout, where exactly you've got this kind of drawing social deduction versus like essentially kind of poker with extra bits. So I think they're really good.
Yeah, this one definitely felt like a family game because you can just play, and there's probably strategy. Essentially, at one point, at every turn you can choose to reduce your hand size, because if you can't play anymore, you're out. And then if everybody gets rid of all of the tiles, then I might have passed that information wrong, but
just don't trust it. If you're gonna don't rely on Russ to read your rule books.
Yeah, exactly. We're not a teaching podcast.
Yeah. This is a recommendation. It's
just
not
getting you started.
Getting the rules right.
You figure out the details yourself. Yeah.
But I did want to briefly mention the other one, which had a really nice theme, especially for ourselves. It's about running a cafe. It's called Overload Order Cafe. It's a memory game. Mm-hmm. There's loads of cards, like a thick deck of cards, and each of them has an item on it. You're trying to get to level 7, so if you've played the Mind, you know, the goal is to get to the end level, and each level you get dealt a number of cards which will have orders on it. Now, one person, before you get dealt them, reads out a list of all of the cards. So, and a lot of them are coffees. So you have like room temperature latte, iced.
Who has a room temperature latte?
We don't
get out of my cafe.
We don't. We have iced and we have hot. So you know, room temperature is just that sort of middle ground, right?
Do you have to leave the milk out of the fridge at that point? That's a health and safety hazard.
It doesn't come with a recipe. I don't know. We don't serve at a Chance Encounters. Maybe we should.
Oh, damn right we don't.
Hot new drinks.
I think you make them and then you have a production line, and they're not allowed to have them for half an hour. You just leave them out, and then.
I actually tell you who has room temperature lattes, me, because when I make them and then I get busy at the cafe and I forget about them, next time I drink it, it's room temperature.
That's definitely a common issue in the office, right? Where you're just like, I'm just going to make a cup of tea. I'll just wait for it to be drinkable. And then you're like, it's stone cold now.
And so, you get this, you go through these cards, you deal them out to players, and essentially you need a certain number of the players to shed their cards. So you take turns listing something that you know was ordered, and if it's right, a player with that card in their hand basically sheds it. So while it does seem quite simplistic, and it probably was, because you're ramping up and you're going to get 7 cards per player in a 4 or 5 player game, I can't remember the player count, you're going to have to remember like a list of 35 things. But the good news is, because you don't have to get everybody, not everybody has to shed their entire hands. You don't have to remember everything. And also, you only have to remember a certain amount of those things, because you're trying to get rid of, somebody else's cards. So as far as memory games go, it definitely felt more of a gamer's memory game than a family one, like Pairs. So I think there's potential for that to be quite chaotic, and just, you can make it harder or more easier by removing some of the cards that seem quite similar. But it was good. I enjoyed it. I probably go Scout, then Overload, then Town 66 in terms of how much I enjoyed them. But I did want to shout them out because they were quite fun.
Nice.
Sounds cool.
I think the first people that I bumped into at the UK Games Expo were the people that was basically on my list. It was just going to see Bez's games, basically. And Bez is a wonderful designer. She's really, really great. She's brings a sort of enthusiasm to the hobby that you don't necessarily see, and there's also like always something a little bit special whenever you go and see her. And this year it was that if you bought some games or you took some games away, then she would put it inside a balloon.
Giant balloon.
Yeah, I saw you. I bumped into you guys, and it looked like you got married or something. You had this giant pink balloon filled with other smaller balloons.
Yes. One in the shape of a heart.
Exactly. So it was fantastic. And seeing that whole like sort of ceremony, the pomp of it, it was wicked. And then you're just walking around and everyone's kind of like looking at you like, why have you got this weird balloon? Where have you been? So I think it was like some pretty spot on advertising for Bez at the same time. So in addition, we'd actually love their games. We recommended it with Lydia. We actually accidentally recommended both of two of Bez's games in the same one. So we absolutely love it. And then Bez brought out a few more games, so we picked up pretty much the whole shebang there.
I just want to point out, so we went to the retailer event, and she had not only the most games. She's not only released. I think I'm going to start again. I just want to point out that the press preview event that we went to, she had the most presence at that games, because I think she's released 5 new games and 6 expansions for games that she's already had. So 11 new games.
Oh my God, she's a machine.
Yes. Yeah. Honestly, I talked a little bit about a design process on a previous podcast, and she's very special at games design, and I'm very glad for her.
She was looking at doing 1 game per convention that she went to at 2022, which
Yeah.
is an insane
How many conventions
idea.
is that?
I think it was akin to 9 or something to that effect.
Yeah.
But Bez's games, if you haven't seen them before, they're like a pack of cards essentially. So somewhere in the region of maybe 54 cards, give or take. I think it literally says on the back it's like 54-ish cards. And they're really, really great. And so they pretty much fit anywhere. You can take them down to the pub with you or whatever. Or I most recently took some to a wedding and got people involved playing those games.
Nice.
So they're fantastic games, and of course they're like very social. So I went to see Bez to begin with, and she made me very happy. It was a very good start to the UK Games Expo for me.
Yeah.
Although then I had a balloon that was like 3 times the size of my head to carry around.
I was just so nervous around that stand, though. They popped 2 balloons before they worked out the trick to making them, and I'm just on edge anytime there's a taut balloon. So that was a very stressful moment for me to start the expo off with.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Did you see anything that you particularly were keen on?
I saw a couple of things. I have to admit, usually when I go to the expo, there's a bunch of things that really jump out and I get excited about. But this year, I saw some things that got my interest, but nothing that I really, really got excited about. So I want to give a shout out to the Nisei group.
Yeah.
Right.
They're a non-profit organization who's looking to keep the old Netrunner card game alive. So I've never really played very much Netrunner, but the people I was with used to play it a lot, and it's an old Fantasy Flight Games living card game, which I don't know if you're familiar with that, but that essentially means it's kind of like a Magic the Gathering situation, but instead of buying boosters and getting random cards, when you buy an expansion, you just get all the cards in one box.
You're never priced out of getting a card because you just didn't get it or it's so rare.
There's no rarity or anything like that. So from what I understand, it was a very, very good game, very well made, very balanced, good for tournaments. But obviously when Fantasy Flight stopped producing it, the community has effectively got together and kept it going. They're playtesting new cards, they're reprinting old cards. I think they've obviously had to remove all of the copyright stuff. So some of the names and art and things have changed, but mechanically it's the same game.
Oh, wow.
And a couple of my friends were there and chatting to them, and they sounded very passionate. Apparently, they got a team of like 50 people, all volunteers, who are playtesting and developing. And so you can buy the whole set from them. And like I say, they're not profit. So any small amount of money, like revenue made over the production costs, goes into hiring artists to make the next batch of cards.
Wow.
So if that sounds like a thing you're interested in, check it out. It looked really cool. They were very passionate, and I appreciated their effort of keeping something they love alive.
Similar to you, like many friends that were kind of interested in Netrunner, and they if you're into Netrunner, you're kind of like pretty, like people know you're into Netrunner by the sounds of it. And it seemed really good, and then they made a lot of people unhappy when, for whatever reason, they stopped. So this is great. It's fantastic. I might check it out if it's got some forward plot thought, as it were. So that'd be really cool. That sounds wicked.
I saw a game that unfortunately it's not available yet, and it's not even on the Kickstarter yet.
Oh no!
But it was called Where Humans Don't Belong.
Okay.
And the concept looked great, and I just had a chat with the designer. And it's an idea about you're on a spaceship, and you get flung across the galaxy. And you find your way home, and on the way home, you can explore, salvage ruined ships, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And it's only for 1 or 2 players.
Oh, cool.
But you've got your ship, you've got to manage your resources, you've got to fly around in space, you explore, you manage your resources, you manage your crew, and you kind of, when you're exploring a derelict, it's a little like a sort of a dungeon thing. And I like the art style. It sounded cool. The concept was cool. So I'm going to keep an eye on that.
Cool. Awesome.
It reminds me of a game that I actually sat down. There's like Escape from
the Aliens in Outer Space.
Aliens.
Yeah.
Is that
no? Escape the Dark. Wait.
Yeah, Escape the Dark Sector. Is one of the games that was there, and so they were showing it. I don't know if it sounds a little bit similar, but that's a game that I managed to play, and I played it with Russ and a friend of mine. And normally I don't like randomness, but this one felt good because we won. I'm not gonna lie, we managed to do a really good job of it. Where the idea is that you're kind of going through these, flipping over cards, and you're reading them off, and then trying to like make decisions. And maybe you're fighting people, maybe you're jumping into burning areas or whatever else. And there's a lot going on with it. And then we were making these like reasonable decisions that if affected affected, infected, or whatever. But basically changed the outcome of how we're going to go. We managed to really power up. We just had a really good run, and we managed to win. And these kind of games, I'm more of a strategy, not much of a dice kind of guy, but this was an interesting mix between story and dice. And now I've done it, I can never play it again.
Yeah, because it will only ruin it for you.
Yeah, you won't be that high of winning.
Exactly.
Themeborn, actually, this is the publisher of that game. They did Escape the Dark Castle, which was a throwback to those text adventures.
Yeah, it's very much like a choose your own adventure, like fighting fantasy kind of game. I love the artwork on Escape the Dark Castle.
And then they've managed to replicate that with a space theme again, probably harking back to some older space-based games. But I wonder if they find themselves stuck to this.
Wow. Funny you should say that, because Themeborn, I spoke to them just before the Expo. They started a Kickstarter for a new game that was radically different to their other two games.
Yes, you told me about this. I remember now.
It was called Strike HQ, and it's a quote-unquote real-time strategy World War II game. It's obviously not. It's a board game, so it can't really be real-time, but heavily inspired by old RTSs. And it looked really cool, but they had to cancel the Kickstarter just before the Expo. Because it just wasn't getting any traction. Right. So they realized that they're going to go back to the drawing board and reassess it.
What was it called again?
Strike HQ.
So I imagine they'll just call it Escape from Strike
HQ. Yeah. So it looked totally different. But they were having a chat amongst themselves about, what about it didn't capture people's imagination. But I went to speak to them because I loved the look of the game, and they gave me a demo of it.
Oh, cool.
And it looks really cool. It's like it's a zero luck fog of war, like war game. So essentially it's a 2-player, you both have a base. There's a grid of like 5 objective territories in the middle. And every time you deploy troops, you put them face down and then you move them around this grid of locations. You've got an order pad, with a dry white marker. So you write down 4 orders, your opponent does the same, then you reveal them. You execute those orders as they're written, and you can't react to what your opponent's done. Okay. Your units move around face down until they meet in combat. Then you flip them over and resolve it. And obviously, tanks beat infantry, but bazookas beat tanks. And there's like a sort of
rock paper scissors,
6-layered rock paper scissors kind of situation going on. So you're not every time you've got a deck of cards, but you're not drawing from the deck randomly. You can pick anything from the deck, put it on top. And then when you execute a build order, you're building the top thing from your deck. Right. So it's all about planning and anticipation, and trying to bluff your opponent. And so imagine it's effectively like playing old like Command and Conquer or Red Alert, but in card game form. I think it's got great potential. But obviously something went a bit wrong, and hopefully they can figure it out and relaunch it maybe later this year.
I wonder how certain companies deal with that. I have seen Kickstarters cancelled and then come back stronger and actually succeed. So, our friend Frank, he does consultancy on sort of Kickstarters, and so I wonder if that's some tactic. There's probably something that they just need to tweak and it'll hit it. And sometimes it's just bad luck,
I think there's an element of snowballing with Kickstarters as well. Once it starts going well, it does better because it's doing better. More people hear about it. It goes on the front page. People talk about it more. And then people see, oh, look at this huge Kickstarter that everyone's backing. I'm going to get on board the hype train. Choo choo. Yeah. And if you don't quite hit that like critical mass, it's probably best to wait and go again with a slight rebrand, I suppose.
I mean, even recently, Steamforged Games has released RuneScape, the board game, and Yogscast did they were doing it whilst it had started, and within like 22 minutes, 24 minutes, whatever, it had already reached its £100,000 goal, and I've got to admit, like, I was so close to pushing that button because I was like, this looks so cool, I've got to play this game. And like, it harks back to like, that's nostalgia as well. But I was just suddenly like, I want to be one of the first backers of this. This is going to be so great. And it looked really cool. And I can imagine the Strike HQ is kind of maybe that thing. If they can play into it, or
I think if it was me personally, if I was in charge of it, I feel like the World War II thing is probably a bit too generic. And if they rebranded it as like something like a StarCraft or a more fantastic kind of exciting universe that could get my imagination a bit more fired up.
I guess
Yeah.
I think that might have.
StarCraft, World of Warcraft. There's actually fairly few like Activision licenses in board games at the moment.
Oh, I didn't specifically mean StarCraft. I just meant something.
No, but that's actually
like
really interesting
that.
because I know a lot of people like if you put StarCraft on an RTS like
Mm.
board game, then yeah, it's absolutely going to catch people's imagination. Like I would know friends who would be like, I would kind of want it just because the
Just
sweet
because
art.
of the
I might be stingy with the licenses. I don't know.
Maybe, but I
Maybe
mean, they've
I-
done World of Warcraft, Small World. There's been a few that they've
Oh,
done.
okay.
Yeah,
There's
true,
been a World of Warcraft pandemic as well.
Yeah,
have
the
there?
Lich King. Yeah.
Oh, I
Wrath
should
of
really.
The Lich King is called.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah,
I mean,
it can be done. I don't know what their what their revenue split rates and all the rest of it are. Who knows?
Yeah.
But I don't know.
It'd be interesting. I do wonder whether or not they're essentially like the Hugh Grant of board game publishers now at this point, where it's like he couldn't get much out of a rom-com situation, and now they're just like, no, we just got to do Escape and it's going to be this kind of like semi-RPG rolling game.
Got pigeonholed.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
I do wonder that is obviously going to run out of, potential themes soon. So they're going to have to.
I don't think they're going to
branch
run
out.
out of themes. I just think they're going to run
They
out of
must do.
steam in terms of like
But
how
probably-
many people are interested.
And how excited can if you're like an artist or a creator or something, you probably would want to try something. You've probably got some great ideas that aren't that exact thing you've just spent the last 5 years doing. You know, you do want to try new things. I totally appreciate that.
No, I mean,
Yeah.
it's cool that you've played it. Seems like you like it. And then it just seems maybe a bit of a marketing or an imagery thing or whatever it would be. But fundamentally, they have a good game on their hands, which is fantastic to hear.
So I mean, because I wanted to talk about another game that I really enjoyed, so this is kind of cool. I spoke to somebody at Cosmo Stand who's like a contact that I know, and she said, "Oh, there's a demo that I'd really love you to try. There's one space for it, and you can play with the designers." And I was like, "Cool, sign me up!" And it is the expansion to a game called the Red Cathedral.
Okay.
Have either of you
I've
played
not heard
that?
of that. No.
So it's not a very exciting theme, I grant, but it's about
What is the
building
Red
up-
Cathedral?
It's a Russian cathedral. That's all I know.
Okay, right. Nice.
So you're building up this cathedral, which is made up of cards. So, different number of players, different number of cards to balance it out. And you collect resources by moving down sort of along a rondel system. So it's just like
What's
a
a
round.
rondel?
So a rondel is usually just like a circle with spaces, and on your turn, you're going to move forward a number of spaces, therefore missing some spaces. But sometimes you just want to go further because there's a resource that you want. Well, each rondel is slightly different, but this one has dice. So essentially, the number on the dice tells you how far you move forward, and wherever you land, there's a little resource token or something on there, which is what you get. And the more dice that's on the space that you land, the more of that resource you get.
Okay.
So that's a cool mechanism. I keep getting those two. So they both mean pretty much the same thing. So you're collecting resources, and then you're going to be delivering them onto these cards and building them up. And it's doesn't sound like a very exciting game, but I've played it and it was really good. So I was kind of interested in the expansion. So when I sat down and got a really lovely demo by a gentleman at the De Vere stand, who was Cosmos published their games in the UK. And as we were sitting there playing the game, he kind of dropped in that, nobody outside of De Vere has actually played this expansion. You're the first people to play it.
Wow.
I was like,
Cool.
that's
pretty
so
cool.
cool.
Yeah.
That's so cool. And then on top of that, as we were there, because I was thinking like, the designers actually aren't here, and they weren't. So some other people just stepped in. And the designers arrived while we were playing the game. And I saw, I think Shay, because there's a couple that designed it, pick up some pieces going like, ooh, like that. And I was like, that's weird. They made the game. Why are they like looking at that? And apparently they have never played the physical copy of the game. This is the first time they've seen it because they've been doing it all online.
Testing on tabletop sim
Yeah.
or whatever.
So picking up these little diamond pieces, which is a new
Wow.
resource in the game, and kind of marveling over it. The expansion's great. It adds more to the game, adds an extra dice, adds a new all these new modular elements. Again, don't want to kind of get into the nitty gritty of how the game plays, but if you like Euro style games,
So what kind of game is it? Is it like a cooperative or like
it's a competitive game. It's ultimately a resource collection game, and not really an engine building element. It is all about the rondel. It's all about being efficient. If you only have so much space to hold your resources, and then there's guilds that you place on the corners of the rondel board. So wherever you land, there's a bonus action which is determined by a card, which is representative of a guild, and usually they do things, exchange resources, do deliveries.
So you said this was a Euro game, but it has dice, which sounds specifically like that's like calling Monopoly with dice.
It definitely felt more like a Euro game. I can't explain why, but the dice, the only randomness in the dice is after you've moved a number of spaces, and wherever you land, you roll all of the dice in that space, so it kind of chooses how far those dice go, but you always have the option to spend money to move it further. Well, some of the dice. And it's a little bit of an engine builder as well, because when you say, hey, I'm going to build the door of this column here, there's an area control thing in the columns. The more pieces you have on that column, you'll score points for. It's very, oh my gosh, it's such.
Certainly,
this is why I didn't
certainly sounds like a Euro in terms of theme.
Yeah.
Slowly building up a cathedral.
Yeah, but you know what? I thought it was great, and I was really glad to try it. And I think that was probably one of the better games I played at the Expo this year.
I think in terms of the Expo, one of the bits that I'm most excited about is when I go to a place and they have oversized games. That is by far my most fun. Like I've gone and there's been what was it, Blue Orange, who make like King Domino and stuff. They've had these oversized things, and we managed to get in on. They were very nice. They kept it open like after the exhibition had technically closed. We were there. We were still playing this game called Dinky Dungeon, which was like we'd seen some kids playing it earlier, and it was just like these square tiles that they would flip over, and it was based on Pathfinder. So it was this. Like you flip over these giant tiles, and these must be like 2 foot, maybe slightly bigger than 2 foot squares. And then they'd be like flipping it over, and they'd be like taking this huge foam dice and then giving it a roll, and they'd be like, "Yay, I'm meant to do something!" And it was just basically like a roll and move, but it was so much fun. And then there was just the 4 of us being like, "Who can do this the fastest?"
Were you your playing piece? Did you have to step on the tiles you were in?
You had like a waistcoat on with like 4 hearts, and every time you killed something, you got a certain amount of XP.
Did you rip a Velcro heart off?
Exactly.
When you got hit?
Like if
that
you got
does sound
wounded,
fun.
you ripped that off, and then if you had you killed it and you got the XP, then you put XP on, and it was whoever had the most XP at the end, and it was really, really good fun. I really enjoyed it, and they were so really nice for keeping it open. We were just there being like, "Thank you very much, I appreciate it." We were being like absolute kids when we were playing. Well, it was great.
I was going to say, because I think ultimately, based on the gameplay, it felt like a kid's game. But
you can't have fun playing the kids' game.
Yeah, we were throwing ourselves into it, and it was quite fun.
I picked up a kids' game to play with my kid when I got home. He absolutely loved it. It's called Castle Feud. Okay. And I don't know if you ever played the old Crossbows and Catapults game when you were a kid.
No.
It's essentially a modern remake of that by a different company, but by a different name.
I think I know which one you're talking about.
And you build a little castle with these plastic bricks, and you hide your soldiers on or behind the walls.
Right.
And then you take it in turns with an elastic band powered catapult to fling rocks at each other's castle, and it's whoever knocks over the other person's people first. So you're just like flinging rubber balls across the room trying to knock down their little bricks.
It's the kind of thing my mom would be like, "You're gonna poke someone's eye out with that." I love that you're like the parent that's just like, "No, it's totally fine. I want to play this."
If anyone does play that, I highly recommend getting like a blanket or some pillows and bunging up the sofa, so no balls go under the sofa. That was like lesson 1. Playing it for 20 minutes, we lost like 5 balls under the sofa immediately. So we could bundled up a blanket there to stop that happening.
You could just turn it into a big thing. You could just make a little pillow fort like with all the sofa cushions, and then play it in that. That would be best.
Next level.
Exactly.
Yeah, but then how can you aim for the other player instead of the fort? I imagine that's what some kids will want to do.
Maybe.
It's true. So
we do not condone this kind of activity, though. That's how eyes get poked out.
So that was it. It's just like another kids game that was surprisingly fun as an adult, and my kid absolutely loved playing that.
In fact, we saw a game as well, which I can't remember what it was called, but essentially it was like a dodo egg at the top. You peeled up this thing, and the entire game, and I don't know what the gameplay was, but it was trying to get these bridges in so that the ball would drop onto them, and then it would like slowly go down like essentially a cylindrical thing. But the ball was it was weird.
It's magic technology.
it
She
was-
wouldn't tell us what it was because I don't think she knew.
No, but it basically like would wibble and then stay for a second and then move on and wibble again, and it was just this slow plod down, and you had to basically play the game and complete it and get this egg onto a boat before it dropped off and cracked, and the dodo had no egg at the end.
The brilliant thing about that is the theme. Even though it was clearly a kid's game, the theme's brilliant. A dodo being an idiot bird. Apparently. I don't know. Sorry
Laying
to
on
any
the side
dodos
of the
out
egg,
there.
the
Delicious, I hear.
Has laid its egg on top of this mountain, and it's just gonna roll and fall and drop and crack, and it's obviously the last dodo alive, or maybe that. I mean, biologically, that.
Hopefully,
can't be
there's
the
more
case,
than one,
but-
because otherwise that won't. Yeah.
And then let's not get into the specifics of that, because the more you think about it, the more creepy that is. But anyway,
Save it for a lifetime of incest.
So, oh god,
Oh dear.
oh no.
We can cut that.
Mum, auntie.
And then you're just basically trying to save it from being, cracked, but like land it gently in this boat. But I was thinking that's a great theme for a game.
Yeah,
It
that's
looked
fun.
great. And it was
Yeah.
very visual, and that's kind of
Yeah.
like another one that if you got that in chance, even though everyone is like over 20 pretty much in there, you'd probably see it and be like, I want to play that game. I don't care what it is. Like you get Mousetrap out on there and people are going to be like, I want to play Mousetrap. Mousetrap is not a good game if you actually play by the rules, but you definitely want to be the person that's like, poof, and then you're just setting all this whole marble run off essentially.
Yeah.
It's the same thing I think with that. I mean, it could have some really good gameplay in it, like,
But that's not the draw, though, is
that's
it?
not the draw.
No.
And they know it as well.
Were there any other games that you played that you were really, really excited about?
There was a couple. So, in terms of games that I actually picked up, one of the other draws of the UK Games Expo is the fact they have the Bring and Buy, which is like the biggest second-hand marketplace in the UK at any specific time, which could be a whole load of bollocks. I don't really know.
But it's big.
It's big. And so what will happen is you can go in, you can check any games that you don't have or that you have and you don't want, and you'll check that in so you can potentially sell over the course of the weekend. And then also you can go into the actual market itself, and then you can look at what's on the shelves and potentially pick up a good board game. I myself went and sold Gloomhaven. So if anybody picked up a Gloomhaven copy with a wooden insert from a well-known manufacturer, then that could well have been mine. And I was just really happy. I was supposed to take that to the 2019 UK Games Expo. I forgot it, and then I was like to my wife, "Oh, don't worry about it. I'll bring it back next year."
Yeah. He didn't bring it back for 3 more years.
Exactly. So I managed to finally get rid of that, and I was like, "Yes, free money. I can basically now go and reinvest this into my board game hobby."
And that's a fair old whack for Gloomhaven. It's a
It really is.
big game.
Yeah. So I then went round and queued up and stuff. And to be honest, by the time I got there, which was afternoon on the Friday, I think a lot of the good pickings had already been taken.
Yeah, I got frustrated in the Bring and Buy because I got there and I got in, and there were 3 games in a row that I saw that I was like, oh, I've always wanted that game, but it's quite expensive and I'm not sure how much I'll love it. But then I saw it secondhand. I was like, brilliant. Went to get it, grabbed it, picked it up, no price on it. And there was a huge queue going all the way around to pay for stuff. And I was like, I'm not queuing up for 20 minutes to find out it's more than I want to pay.
Yeah.
So I put it down, grabbed another one, same problem.
All right.
Wow.
Saw a different game I wanted, same problem. 3 in a row without a price on, and this queue was just getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and I was just like, then I bailed out. I just couldn't be bothered after that.
I didn't have that issue, fortunately. I managed to pick up some that had just come out, fresh off the press, as it were, or the second printing. I managed to pick up a copy of Wavelength, actually, for like 20 quid, and like that's been in and out of print for quite some time, and it was so good that I didn't even check it whilst I was in there at the point. I didn't realize, but you could. There's like we have it in a cafe, but it obviously gets a bit of use. It's quite a smooth function as you kind of rotate it slightly right and left.
What is it, like a radio kind of tuning thing?
No.
It's a good point. We should probably
because this motion doesn't show up on audio very well.
It really doesn't. No, so I think Russ explained it best. It's a case of measuring subjective
things on a scale that is, so for example, hot or cold.
Yes.
You're going to get given a point along that scale.
A bit like a radio dial, where it'll have on, from left or if you're trying to tune that frequency, as it were, you'll spin a dial and it'll give you a vague area you're trying to get them to tune into, as it were. And then what will happen is the person who's doing it will if it was between the hot and cold and they went, ice cream, you'd be like, okay, well, it's not the super frozen, but it's it's probably more frozen or more cold than hot, as it were. And then you'll have this whole discussion about, oh, what is Richard's subjective knowledge about that? And so
I see.
it's really good, and it's honestly the kind of board game I can bring to the table, because it'll take about 2 minutes to explain, less than that, and
the gameplay is just discussion rather than mechanics.
Exactly, and you can kind of play as many times as you want or whatever else. Normally, everybody wants a go at doing the dial, as it were, but it was so new that it was like you could hear the clicks of it as you kind of did it, and I was like, yeah, this is someone has gone, I don't really like wavelength, I can't bring it to the table, and they're like the opposite of me, whereas all of my people I play with are probably on the let's play something like really easy and get to the table, and I don't want to have to think about it. Whereas they're probably like, oh, you know what? If it's not Feast for Odin or whatever else, like 4-hour games, Twilight Imperium, then it's not going to get to the table. I was just like, sweet. So I was the only one. I didn't see too much in terms of the cost, like the price mislabeling.
I think I just got unlucky because almost everything else I saw did have prices on.
I wonder if it's people who've brought their own game in, realized they've overpriced it, and just removed it, the lower priced ones,
maybe
getting themselves.
Wow, Dick Dastardly of the
bring
and buy.
Happened, but I just want to point out that I have never used or sold anything at a bring and buy, so that's not a tactic I use. Just so you know.
I've been to the bring and buy as a purchaser before. It was my first year doing the actual selling, and it was really good. Like 10% of all sales go to charity, so
that's great.
Yeah,
it's a nice thing to be involved in. I think it's pretty much volunteers that are running it, so. It is a great place to have well-loved stuff. Like I'm a big fan of going into a charity store and finding like secondhand books, and then like always going into certain sections, being like, do they have that next book in the series that I really, really want? And so it's kind of like that. All of it's feel good, and you can get some bargains.
I did hear something shocking about the bring and buy. So when I turned up,
other than people taking off the price labels,
that's to be expected.
Standard fare, high level tactics.
No, so obviously Rich brought his game, and it was all cling film wrapped up.
It was like
and I thought
10 kilograms.
Yeah.
It was so heavy.
And there were other people bringing their games or wrapping their games when I was there, and I was like, oh, maybe that's just a weird thing, like a COVID thing, I don't know. And then when I don't know when it was I heard it, but then people said, oh yeah, some people use the bring and buy as a sort of missing parts library. So if you've got a game that you're missing a card or a token, you can go into the bring and buy,
examine a secondhand copy, and just swipe out the missing part.
And I said, I wouldn't even dream of doing that. That's so horrific.
Yeah,
it's
that's
crime.
horrendous.
And so it makes sense now why they all cling film their boxes, to stop people doing that.
Wow.
I didn't even know that was a thing. I cling filmed it because I was just like, there's so many things in this that if you're not like disincentivizing people, then I just assumed they'd open the box and it would just go everywhere and it was
make a mess.
At which point it's kind of on you. So I was just like, I'm gonna follow. I'm gonna do what everybody else has done. And there was me at home, like cling filming it, getting it ready, being like, you know what, I'm probably taking this too far. But I wasn't taking it too far.
Otherwise, you'd have lost that miniature that someone missed. I had a copy of Gloomhaven that came with 2 miniatures that were the same.
I had the same issue.
Yeah, exactly the same figure, and so I can't use one of the characters in it. Anyway,
in this particular instance, Gloomhaven have the ability. So normally publishers will, if you reach out, you can chat to them. I think we had a Dominion. Which had like 2 sets of the same decks, and Gloomhaven also have it, that they will replace miniatures and stuff.
To be honest, unless it's a deal breaker, I know that from speaking to people in the industry, publishers and that to replace missing parts, especially with shipping, and margins aren't that great.
Yeah, it must be incredibly expensive for them.
Sometimes that can be the difference between making a profit and a loss on a game.
And
I just don't care that much. I'm usually okay to work around anything.
There are like 12, 15 characters in Gloomhaven, I guess. There's a good chance
exactly.
You could,
and also, you can proxy it.
Yeah.
You could just
use a different miniature.
Exactly. Something else. It doesn't make a difference to the gameplay. So the only thing I would say is that, and I came up with this idea during the convention, and I forgot to tweet about it, but I think that publishers should bring boxes of missing parts and pieces or extra parts and pieces.
Like a lost and found kind of situation.
Yeah, so then it's like kind of like a an amnesty. You know, we won't ask any questions, but if you need a missing piece, you can just take it from there.
I mean, it would mean that you could reduce everything down and be like, okay, yeah, we can't post this out to you, but if you come or you know someone that's coming to this convention, we'll happily give you one.
I think I would happily wait to go to a convention and just say pick up that missing miniature that I got.
If nothing else, because the people that are probably reaching out to you are people who are a bit more into the hobby and they
more invested.
Because we had a conversation about essentially the quality of games and the issues that you have around the shipping out of board games and boxes and making sure that some people are collectors, as it were, and so they need to make sure that it's shipped out and it's not damaged in any way. And this whole thing is very difficult for publishers, and the logistics involved, I don't even want to get into. Like, that's just ridiculous.
I've always been very impressed with any publisher that's like, yeah, we'll ship it out, as opposed to a big company like Catan. Once, when we received a copy for like a library for a previous job I had, and asked them, hey, we got one damaged road and one like missing house in our copy of Catan, and instead of just sending them out, that you'd think, you know, a big company like Catan, they asked for documentation of the issues, and I thought, oh, they'll send us a whole new set, and only sent us those 2 missing pieces, which I thought was, you know, kind of OTT or very, very stingy, but knowing a little bit more about it, that kind of makes a bit more sense now. But hey.
Occasionally what will happen is we end up if we get a copy of, you know, a board game in the cafe that breaks or whatever, we might set it aside and we'll use it to salvage the spare parts for the other game that kind of is inevitably going to break down or lose something or else.
We've got so many Carcassonne meeples spare in a drawer in the cafe, just waiting to be replaced, waiting for their chance to shine.
Speaking of missing parts, actually, I recently went to a Bring and Buy in Bristol and randomly rolled the dice on a set of Journeys in Middle-earth, which is a Lord of the Rings like miniatures game. Well, not miniatures, it's more of like there are miniatures, but it's like an adventure explorer map kind of game. And I was like, £15, this normally retails for £90. There's definitely missing pieces. And the guy selling it was like, it's not mine. I don't know. Like,
it was his.
It probably was his, but he just wasn't willing to get into the details. I didn't know what should be in the box. I was like, I'm going to roll the dice on this. Maybe I'll figure out what's missing and then pick them up on eBay or something like that, because, you know, that's £75 off. I can proxy some missing parts. Got it home, and it's missing all the cards. It's got all the dice, tokens, miniatures, boards, everything.
Wow.
But it's missing about 300 cards, which is such a weird thing to lose. I don't know how that's happened, how he's managed to lose all the cards.
Maybe he brought it to a previous year at the UK Games Expo Bring and Buy.
And he didn't sell, and someone else just had the cards. Yeah.
Wow, that's
good tip though. I'll go to the expo next year.
Please don't do that
with a box cutter.
I would actually largely say
my own cellophane wrapping machine. They'll never know it was me. No, of course.
There were like legitimately games in there that were still in their first wrap,
original shrink wrap.
Exactly.
Wow.
And so there was a lot of like Guilds of London. Like, I think it was the first UK Games Expo I ever went to. Like, Guilds of London or something was the hot game that year. So I obviously got caught up in the hype and bought one of them. I've never played it. I mean, it's in the cafe, but then seeing it there, being like, oh, these were 6 years ago. Like, everyone got caught up in the hype and also didn't play this game.
Not the only one.
Yeah.
Wow. I know I've mentioned this game before, by the way, but I did have a surprise buy at the expo. I've talked about my love for Unmatched on an episode, but one retailer at the expo had imported a set that isn't even out here, and I'm not even sure when it's going to be out, but it was the T-Rex versus Dr. Sattler set for Unmatched. So
you were so happy when you saw that.
I was so excited.
It's really exciting though, because the models in Unmatched, they're about sort of 30-40 mil roughly.
You definitely know when you're playing tabletop when it's in mils at that point.
I think they're about 40 mil models.
They're probably about the size of your little finger.
But this T-Rex is
oh god, it's huge.
It's huge. It's like the size of a kid's like toy dinosaur kind of thing. You know, it's about like 6 inches high and about 8 inches long or something. It towers over every other thing in that game. It is crazy.
It takes up more than one space on the board, and that's one of the aspects of the figure. And it's funny because in a previous set, I think it might have been the Cobble and Fog set, it made a reference to large characters cannot use these secret passages, and at the time everybody said,
any.
What do you mean large characters? Is Beowulf large? Is Bigfoot large?
It's good future proofing.
Yeah. Well, they must have been working on it around the same time as that, because the Raptors versus InGen set was released around the same time.
Yeah.
And now we understand why, because T-Rex is huge.
There you go.
And it's really cool. The T-Rex is the one I played as when I tried it out. And I just don't know how it can't win every match, because it's a friggin' T-Rex. But it's a very, like...
I mean, it's unmatched.
I don't know. I have a 3-game win streak undefeated with Sherlock Holmes. I'm sure he can work his way around a T-Rex.
How does Sherlock Holmes do damage?
Oh, just,
Thinking mind bullets.
Well, he has Watson following him around with a revolver,
right.
which really helps.
Yeah.
Just throws Watson at the T-Rex.
But generally, there's just a lot of cards with pictures of him going...
Oh, really?
Thinking real hard and deducing their exact weakness.
I feel like
he just works out that cutting remark that just hurts them to their core and makes them reevaluate their lives.
Small arms, Mr. T-Rex. You know what? Just feels over.
Like, and then he'd be like, I knew you'd say that. I was thinking more about the magnifying glass, like concentrating the sun and just kind of doing some burn damage. Okay. I don't know. You don't ask too many questions about.
It's a little abstract, this game. It's okay.
but it's a fun character to use. They
wait until the brides of the brides of Dracula seduce the T-Rex.
Oh no.
I'm just having so with the introduction of the T-Rex, just every set against that just seems crazy, other than the Raptors. But it's fun. I'm glad I got to pick that up.
You were having a real quandary when you were there. You were just like, "Oh, do I get it? What do I do?" And I'm like, "Well, you have to get it now. Like, it's the only one in the UK."
Yeah, I mean,
you were so excited when you got it, though. I think it was the right move.
I found Ben later on, and I just said, I just need someone to acknowledge that this is a really cool
You did a
find.
drive-by. You just ran past and said, Ben, look at this! And they just disappeared off into the crowd.
I acknowledged and just run off to look at more games.
That wasn't the only thing about Unmatched that you were actually super keen about. It was because we were also there for the retailer day, and then Russ had seen that underneath the table that they had this FedEx postage envelope, and that they'd given out something.
I spotted a deal going down.
So you were like, "Oh, what's this?"
I knew
what
it
could
was
it
something
possibly be?
I knew it was something to do with Unmatched.
So you went over there, you talked to someone, and they just kind of gave you a bit of a brush off, to be honest.
Yeah.
And then we did a circle around and came back about half an hour later.
Clever
and
girls.
then you got very interested.
I was bold at this point. I was like, I'm either going to miss out on this if I don't say something.
You've got the
scent.
Promotional materials.
Well, I think I said...
Give me the promo!
The best bit was I didn't even know what it was. I just knew it was something to do with Unmatched.
That only made you more excited
There was
for
something
it, though.
glinting off the weird lights in there.
So I think I used the line, I just wish there was something, special I could, get my hands on. And he said, "Oh, funny you should say that." Like, I don't know.
Luckily, they'd had a staff change at that point.
It did, actually.
Sherlock, you just found his weakness and you managed to be like, "Oh, this is how I get the loot."
And then he brought up this little FedEx envelope because and it was literally about an A4 size envelope. There couldn't have been that many cards in there. And brought out, and he gave me one for each set. So there's 4 promo cards with multiple cards, and I believe, because I haven't opened them yet, because they're still
then they'll lose
pristine.
value at that point.
Yeah, well, I'm going to use them because I'm a weird person who just thinks games should be played. I don't necessarily believe in sleeving cards.
Sleeve them in proper thick plastic.
Yeah. I would probably be the guy that found a Black Lotus and just kind of used it as normal. Okay, that's a bit. I lie. I wouldn't do that. I would get the money, but
Black Lotus being the most expensive single card in
Magic the Gathering.
Magic the Gathering
Pokemon
ever?
cards have gone through the roof though. Now
really?
There's been a real surge in the last 2 years. There are Pokemon cards now that are worth. There's one sold for $1.3 million, I think, last month, a couple of months ago.
Yeah, that's why I don't play Pokemon. It's just too expensive.
They had a Pokemon raffle there. There was a card grading stand, right? So if you've got a rare card, you can have an expert grade it, and they'll give it a ranking based on the condition of the card.
Right.
That's what you do. If you've got one of these super rare cards, you have to have it graded before any serious collector will buy it from you.
Oh wow!
It's like getting like a chartered accountant to like stamp of approval on it.
Yeah.
And so they had this grading stand where you could come and get your cards graded, but they also had like these special boxes, these wooden fancy boxes with like metal clasps and everything. And you bought one for like, I forget how much it was. I think it was like £100 for one of these wooden boxes. And, some of them had like two, like quote unquote, for the audio listeners, cards worth £2,000 in. Some of them only had like £50 cards in. So it was like this like Pokemon card roulette where you pay up substantial amount of money for a graded card of like various value. I don't know. As someone who doesn't care about rare cards or Pokemon, felt like a real scam. But you paid your money and you take your chances, I guess. If you need that Charizard, that's you might get it for £100 instead of £100,000 or whatever it costs now.
My TCG success story, that's trading card games, was that I had a full set of Yu-Gi-Oh! Exodia, which if you've ever seen the thing, was just
I've heard of the meme.
I've never heard of that before in my life.
Like, some people might know about it, and please let me know if you're as excited about that as I do. I no longer have them.
Did you sell them or did you lose them?
I did actually sell them. I probably sold them at an absolute loss. I was just like, this is really cool.
Well, you never knew what it'd be worth these days. There was a huge Yu-Gi-Oh! Tournament at the Expo. I don't know if you went over and saw it. There was more people playing Yu-Gi-Oh! Than Star Wars, Armada, Legion, and X-Wing put together.
Wow.
It was like half the gaming hall was just Yu-Gi-Oh! Players.
That's a lot.
It's having a comeback, I think.
Back in my youth, I did do some tournament play, but my tournament play consisted of like just putting a deck together of the cards that I had and just saying like, this is cool, this is what everyone does, right? Rather than you go and then someone's playing like a deck that has been like on the internet, that's been like performing very well at previous tournaments, and then they just destroy you and you're just like, but I just this is a really cute Pokemon. I wouldn't even be in the deck, it was Yu-Gi-Oh!
Oh, I do have to admit, actually, like there was tournaments definitely lost something when like net decking and net listing became a thing. A certain innocence has disappeared from
for a layman like me who don't know what that is.
Oh, sorry, yeah. So back in the day, when you go to a tournament, either for miniatures or cards, you would design, you'd build your deck or you'd make your army and you'd see how you did and you'd have a fun time. Whereas nowadays, because everything's on the internet now, you can look back at the last 2 years of tournament results and see, what was the exact list of cards the top 5 people used at every event. And then you can just copy it exactly or make your own twist on it or design your deck specifically to battle what's popular right now. So when you just grab something and copy it from the internet, that's called net decking or net listing.
I was just thinking that doesn't sound fun to me. I'd rather just build up a deck and just
try
it.
Some people don't really enjoy deck building. They just want to play the game. They don't like the prep and the thinking and the studying. And so I totally appreciate, I just want to play the game and I want to be able to compete with other people who have very good decks. So the only, that makes sense. I don't,
This is a good segue into a game that I didn't actually get to demo there, but I had demoed briefly at AirCon, which is another convention earlier this year, called Blazeball, the card game.
Oh, yeah.
And it felt very much of that Netrunner style. You have, a deck and you're battling, but this is based around baseball, but specifically a internet phenomenon called Blazeball, which is baseball on steroids, to use a...
Not literally on steroids, right?
No,
They're not all juicing athletes.
It's designed by, I think it's called Wayfinder Games, and they published a game called The Split, which I haven't actually got to demo, but I'd like to try that soon. But Blazeball is a brand, and they managed to get the license to make a game around Blazeball, but it feels like a deck building.
So is Blazeball like a real life sport?
No, it's an internet
Sounds
thing.
like it would be really fun though.
Yeah,
it's really
baseball extreme.
Yeah, it's just actually on fire. And we just throw it.
It's baseball with an L. It's not Blazeball. Blazeball. I think they pronounce. I don't know. I'm not.
This is getting rapidly less interesting with every new development.
Well, I should say that the game is, has androids. It's got characters that are just animals.
Cool.
Honestly, it's a bit
mad. Back in, you've got robots and animals.
It's got a meta element to it because in real life, it's an internet game that you can just kind of bet on and you support your team. So it's almost like fantasy football. I'm probably doing this really bad justice, but if you Google Blazeball, And
It
if it
sounds
sounds
so
like you're
clunky
kind
coming
of,
out.
yeah,
Lace
I
ball.
think that's why it's Blaze Ball is probably
Yeah.
better. I'm not sure, but I just wanted to give a little shout out to them because they're on Kickstarter as of recording, and it was a fun little deck building kind of game in the vein of these trading card, living card games, which I think is worth a little look if you're interested in that.
Cool.
So I guess at this point, is there any and then last shout outs you wanted to say? Anything that you found interesting at the UK Games Expo?
Yeah, there's a couple of games. I'm going to get my list up.
Ross just still could go on for days.
Just a quick couple of things that I wanted to shout out about. There was a really neat game called Kites in the Sky, which is a real-time games. Don't tend to excite me at all, but this is a sand timer game.
Okay.
So you've got kites represented by different colored sand timers, each a different amount of time. And it's a really quick card playing game. You play a card down, it's either got one or two symbols and therefore colors on it, and that means you flip over those timers, those sand timers. There's also one to represent the game time as well, as well. So if any of them run out, you lose, and it's about trying to keep these kites up in the sky. Very simple, quick card game, and that's by Floodgate Games, and that's not even out yet, which was cool because I got a little sneak preview of that. That was fun. There's another game that I got to try called The Gig, which is a competitive roll and write about being in a band, being in a jazz band, essentially.
That's the closest I'll ever get to success.
Yeah.
I could never play a music instrument very well.
Well, you don't have to. You don't have to learn, but it's really nicely themed. The presentation was good, even though I only played a prototype copy, because that is also another game that was on Kickstarter, and that's published by Brain Crack Games. Really cool. You're rolling the dice to try and claim spots in the songbook, and depending on where you place, there are symbols which will help you score points, sets of points, and you can also use those to manipulate dice results as well. And the shape that you form by the dice that you place also helps you fill in your player board, which is, again, another way to score points. But it's asymmetric, so each player's character or the instrument they play has a different ability, and that's kind of neat as well. And also there was a company I'd never heard of, and it very much felt like they were gunning for Big Potato spot as the Supremo party game company, and that was Format Games, run by or started by a well-known person in the industry called Matt Edmondson, who actually designed Obama Llama. I know probably people will have heard of that game. That was a Big Potatoes game, and a couple of really neat takes on a party game, trivia style. My favorite, I think, had to be the So Wrong It's Right. So it's a trivia game where you had all of the questions have a correct answer, but depending on which card of a small deck gets flipped over, you might have to say the right answer. You might have to say a wrong answer. You might also have to say the right answer with the two first letters flipped around or removed.
You Nork.
Yeah. You Nork or you Orc. That could be a
I would be
legitimate answer.
so bad at that game.
Yeah.
Oh
I
my
was
God.
bad at that game.
I was pretty
Ross
good.
was very good at this.
I
He was literally just on
I can
fire
barely
the whole
speak
time.
properly normally at the most best of
Exactly.
times.
But the funny thing was is that we were playing. Matt was there partially on Friday and partially on Saturday, demoing his own games, which was pretty cool. And at one point when I was doing all right, because he's played these in millions of times and he even knows the answers, but you could see, not this game specifically, previous games, but you could see he was getting a bit frustrated, I think, that he wasn't winning, which made me respect him even more, to be fair. And I actually still managed to win, but I sensed that maybe he was just making me feel that way, that, oh, you did really well. But I loved that. I thought there was a couple of good games.
You did do very well. That just seems to be like a game right up your street.
Yeah, I found my thing. And then the last one, which is a game that isn't out yet, is called Starship Captains. It's a game coming out. CGE, yeah, so Czech Games Edition. They do a certain type of game which you either kind of you're all over or feels a bit weird, because they always kind of go with a little bit of humor in their games.
Yeah,
so this one is
silly.
You're taking on the role of essentially a Star Trek. I'm going to say it. It's definitely inspired by Star Trek. You've been it's a bit of like a budget Star Trek, because you've been given a charge of this ship, which is a bit battered and bruised, and you have workers that are different colors, and each worker has a specialty. So one lets you move around this kind of around the planets on the board. One lets you repair damage. One lets you buy new technology, which give you kind of upgrades or passive abilities. And once you've used them, they kind of go in this little queue. It's really hard to describe. So YouTube viewers are going to have an advantage here, but it's essentially like a queue. So you push them down this sort of line, then this like double layered boards with a sort of slots. You push them down, and then when the round ends, you're going to push all the people in that line. So only the last 3 in that line, they kind of get locked in place, and you can't use them for this current round.
Right.
But you get to use everyone that you've pushed into your sort of pool again.
Okay, so effectively everyone kind of has a cooldown.
Only the last 3 that you push. So you have to be a bit tactical which colors you use as your last 3 actions in the game.
Because you won't get them next turn.
Because you won't get them. And if you've used all your red workers, for example, it means you can't really move around the map, and that's restrictive. It is still a work in progress, and it was kindly demoed by the designer, but I thought it was a really...
I do love actually getting demoed by the designer, because often it's one of the people who's helping out on the day, and you know they know the game and it's all good and fine, but you get so much more passion and like, you know, it's so much easier to get excited about a game when you're playing it with the person who made it, and he's just really excited to tell you all about it. And
he was pointing out Easter eggs. He said, "Oh, that's from that's the thing, and so from Star Wars, which I've never watched. I'm happy to say that again. Probably going to get some comments about that." And pointing out just other things that were clearly inspired. It was kind of neat. I liked it.
Speaking of Check's Games Edition, at the end of the day on the Friday, I was about to go, and I hadn't actually bought a game yet, and I was having a bit of a panic. I can't leave the UK Games Expo without having literally bought a game.
It's an unwritten rule.
So I went through the games that were nominated for awards that year, and just thought, well, I'm just going to buy one of these because they're probably good.
Fair. It's a good assumption.
And ended up picking up the Lost Ruins of Arnak, which is the Check's Games Edition game. But I didn't actually get around to playing it. So I've got it at home. I'm going to try and play it this weekend.
I can tell you, it's bloody great.
Yeah, well, it won Spiel des Jahres, and it was nominated at the Expo, so I thought this feels like a really safe bet.
Nice mix of worker placement and deck building, but very tight in both of those mechanisms, because you only get 2 workers to place each round, and you only get to buy sort of a couple of cards and play 5 each round. Really weirdly addictive gameplay. It's just,
I don't know if it's lost something. I played it on Board Game Arena, which is like an online platform where you play it. I didn't get it. So I'll be really interested to know what you play.
Did I teach it to you? Because I might have
I just played it with
the rules wrong.
Probably, yeah. No, there was like 2. It was for 2 players, so maybe it's better I play better at a higher play count. You know, we've talked about what it can do and what it really should be doing before, but I'd be interested to know what you think about it, because or if anybody else is like, oh, Lost Ruins of Arnak, like there's a lot of hype around it. I was underwhelmed, but I'm sure I'm in the minority.
Well, maybe not. I mean, you know, there's plenty of popular games I'm not a fan of. Like, everyone has different tastes.
Yeah.
I actually was keeping an eye out for the expansion, but I wasn't able to find it anywhere at the Expo. But that's something I'd like to get. I really love the game. I
do love Czech Games Edition as a publisher. Like they're doing good stuff at the moment, and they have some incredible designers, and they are like branching out from their big hit being Codenames. Like lots of people know them for that. But they
Galaxy Trucker as well. That was quite an old one now, I suppose. But
it's
that was
come
a big
back
one
as a second edition now.
Yeah.
So like by all means, that's a great publisher to check out. Okay. Well, with that, I think we've managed to cover pretty much everything that we wanted to. That we went to go and see. Some of us had bigger lists than others. Some that we managed to see at the actual time, and overall, like what the UK Games Expo contained as well. So I think we've done a pretty good roundup of that. And if you managed to get through this far, thank you for hearing us babble.
Yeah, definitely. And if you're watching YouTube, leave us a comment. Do you like this different odd format?
Did you go to the UK Games Expo and did you find something that you actually liked? What did we miss?
Yes.
What wasn't on Russ's list of games that
I'm sure there was one out there that we didn't talk about. Exactly. Let us know what it was.
There was me thinking I didn't play enough games. And I'm looking no, actually I did. I think I got my fill in. Yeah.
Absolutely. But thank you so much for bearing with us. Well, hopefully it was as enjoyable for you as it was for us.
Yes.
If you are on YouTube and you haven't downloaded it as a podcast, please consider looking on that and subscribing to it.
Definitely.
And as Ben said, what do you think of the format? Do you like a few bits of odd news? Do you think we should go to more conventions? Should we send Ben to the US to go to one of those conventions?
We may have to start a Patreon.
Make that GoFundMe. But once again, thank you so much. Have a good one.
Bye.